What's up, YouTube land? It's your boy Anton, aka Dr. Mix-a-Lot, and today I'm here to talk to you about the do's and don'ts of operating a mobile bartending business. Now, the first do before anything else you want to have is have at least 1 full year of bartending experience, preferably in a high pressure, high volume situation like at retail. Anything like a Fridays and Applebee's, any standard restaurant where you have a lot of volume in reliably. Over the weekends, especially, and also catering experience where you work for, a high class caterer. They usually don't pay that much, but it still gives you a lot of insight on how to work finer class events, high class events for customers, which are the customers that tend to pay. So with either of those, especially retail, I highly recommend, again, because you want to make sure that when you get out there all on your own, you have everything all the knowledge at your disposal that you need. And that only comes through experience. As any of my hardcore bartenders can tell you, if you haven't had at least a few nights where you want to leave out the door crying your first few months or so in bartending, you haven't had that real high pressure experience where you feel like you can handle any situation. Trust me, I admit I've had those situations, but those were a long time ago. And I really owe all the testimonials and good reviews that I get on my bartending skills based on my at least 1 year bartending experience in a retail and catering environment. The next most important thing is to make sure that you do collect pictures and testimonials. I can't tell you enough how that does a lot of my selling right there. You want to make sure that you have pictures simply showing that you know what you're doing, that customers enjoy themselves, and that you can replicate this experience. And the best way to do that, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. There you go right there. Also testimonials, whenever you can collect them, make sure you follow up with your customers after an event. Just let them know, hey, I had a great time working your event. And if you could leave me a testimonial at this website, my own website, what have you, I'd really appreciate it. And you'll be surprised how far those will go in making that sell for that next customer. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you have the proper tools ready for your event. At the very, very least, you have to have at least a wine key and also a beer bottle opener. So that way you're able to at least open wine and beer, which will always be at your event. Liquor, you can still get past even without the pours, which I usually like, but at the very least, you want to have those two tools. But with that said, you'll also want to get, again, liquor pours, bar spoons, muddlers, all that other stuff. There's also coolers and for storage and things of that nature. And I'll go into more details on that in my other videos. But the bottom line is you want to at least make sure that you have all the proper tools that you need to work the event based on the context. Some events will be smaller and you won't need that much. But when you want to get into higher scale events, there's a lot more tools that you're going to need. And you're going to want to make sure that you have a list of those and you're ready to go with that. The next do is use contracts in your business. I cannot tell you enough how there will be disputes in your business, and you have to think of these things ahead of time. And the best way to do that is use contracts with clear terms stating the services you're going to render, how much they cost, and if anything goes, wrong as far as liability, insurance, what have you. Again, as I've said in other videos, probably 70% of the things that need to be said should be written in your contract, because there's going to be a lot of unsaid things when you're going in the course of your business, and you want to make sure that you have things written down ahead of time to back that up, that the customer has signed. You both acknowledge that this are the terms of me rendering my service to the customer. The next do is to make sure you get business cards. Again, I make about an average of about $200 an event. So I see every business card as a $200 bill in my pocket because every time I go to an event, I leave those business cards. 2 to 3 people might pick them up and I might hear from one of them. sometimes multiple people from the same party. I've had that happen before. So again, it's very easy to get business cards. Usually what I do is just, I have a little Microsoft PowerPoint slide that I made with all my logos and all that stuff. It's also a good idea to put QR codes on there so people can find you fast, whether your website or even to tip you through Cash App and other things like that. But regardless, no matter how fancy or dull it is, get business cards. Make sure people know your business, your name, and your contact information, and you will definitely thank me later. The next is to basically know your drinks. Obviously, that seems obvious, of course, but you'd be surprised how much you might not know. And again, this falls back on my at least having 1 year of full retail bartending experience, because that will give you the structure, the recipes, the experience of making drinks under pressure. And though you can't get as creative with making your own stuff there, it's very good because you can follow recipes, and it really turns you into a skilled and knowledgeable bartender. And that is why I would recommend that, because you will know your drinks if you have that experience going into an event. The next thing is to get as much info from your bartenders that you send out as possible. It is kind of difficult sometimes when I do subcontract out events to other colleagues where they use their other bartenders, and sometimes I don't exactly know who's going. Obviously, I try to keep this to a minimum, and luckily those things have gone well. But you want to make sure that you gather up as much information from your bartenders as possible. A lot of the bartenders I've worked with, I've gotten from the Maryland Bartending Academy, which requires them to present their resume, their experience, and basically does the background check for you to make sure that they're qualified to work the event. But you will come across bartenders you meet in the field, and if you see their work, that's great. Make sure that they have some sort of contact information, a resume, a website, Facebook, something to let you know that they're independently operating and that they'll be able to handle themselves when you send them out to an event, because you have to protect your reputation, and you're only as good as the people that you send out. So again, make sure you gather as much information from your bartenders as possible. Another do, which I hopefully you do like to do, is you have to love your craft. I can't tell you how awesome it is to be a freelance bartender, especially getting out of from under the thumb of retail bartending and catering. Again, it was a great experience to do that, but really it was a lot of drudge work, a lot of paying my dues, not getting paid a lot of money, having to work at a lot of different places. And though I love bartending, eventually I got to the point where I felt like I could do this on my own and operate independently and bring my level of service to customers and get paid the price that I commanded. And you got to make sure that you do love being a bartender in any environment, but I guarantee you in the freelance environment, you will love it all the more. And you got to make sure that that enthusiasm is infectious to your customers. The next do is to be able to answer any questions the customers have, even if you have to get back to them. It can be as simple as, how much that you charge for an extra service, how much extra you would charge depending on how many customers there will be, what you would do in the case of having, terms like a photo release, things like that. You want to make sure that you're able to answer any questions they have, even if it's, I have to get back to you, that's fine. Don't act like you know all the answers, but just make sure that you present competent, clear responses to your customers, and then make sure that you're able to follow up with them with any questions that they do have. The next do is to educate yourself about your business and your craft. I'm constantly looking at different YouTube videos, for example, on other mobile bartending businesses, making sure that I'm studying up on my recipes and that I stay sharp on being the best bartender that I can be when I go to these events. So I just want to encourage you to make sure that you always continue to do your research and make sure that you stay as sharp as you can. And now on to the don'ts of a mobile bartending business. The first is don't operate without alcohol awareness training, a business license, or insurance. Again, I know that might sound daunting to get at the front end, and as I've explained in other videos, you can work towards those things in time, even if you start a few events without these things. But eventually, you're going to want to get them. There is no such thing as a bartender's license, as I've explained in other videos, and have since looked through other YouTube videos that have corroborated that. So the next best thing is to just get an alcohol awareness training, something like tips, or your different state or local organizations. Like, for example, they have TAMS in Maryland. I actually took a course called Toast VA in Virginia when I was there, and that was a private business that was certified by the state. So any way you can, just get some sort of alcohol awareness training showing that you've taken this training, it's usually annual renewal, and that you're up to code on how to deal with customers and serve alcohol responsibly. You're also going to have a business license, because that basically just makes you a more legitimate business. I also, in other videos, recommend operating as an LLC, because that will give you a layer of legitimacy that will allow people to look you up, show that you're a legitimate business. That will make them more inclined to work with you. And that also is a huge benefit, tax time, which I'll explain in other videos. And finally, insurance. When you're getting operating big enough and have enough revenue to where you can justify it, you're definitely going to want to get insurance, because that will make sure that, one, you're covered on the financial end if anything goes wrong, knock on wood, but things happen. And two, and actually this too is probably primary, is that you'll be able to work more events. Customers normally are either alleviated that you do have insurance, and it shows them that you're responsible enough to take their event seriously. And there's other events where it's absolutely required by the venue. So again, you really don't want to operate with at least one of these three things, and preferably you want to operate with all three. The next do not, which is pretty obvious, is don't be late to an event. Trust me, I have been late. I have played that game. Things happen, and I understand that. But at the same time, you want to do everything in your power to make sure that you're not late to an event, especially if you're starting off, because luckily I have been skilled enough to dig myself out of a hole at events that I've shown up late to. Shame on me, but I was able to smooth it over. But you really don't want to start on your heels like that, especially at weddings and things of that nature, where people are really dependent on you to get this thing done. Just make sure you allow yourself time to account for traffic, any additional items you might have to have. If you get lost, even parking. Trust anybody operating in DC, you know what I'm talking about. It could take you 20 to 30 minutes alone to find somewhere to park. So just some things to keep in mind. The next don't communicate poorly with your customers. Communication is key. Again, what I talked about earlier with contracts, a lot of that communication can be addressed, written down in a contract you and your customer sign, so that way it's understood. Whether they read it or not, that's up to them, but it's understood that they signed something that explains exactly how you operate and how you deal with any contingencies that may occur. And other than that, just, basic customer service things. Answer emails in a timely fashion. I usually have something at the bottom of my email signatures that says, please allow 12 to 24 hours for response, because sometimes it can take me that long, maybe longer, to respond to them. But at least if you set that expectation, boom, that buys me an extra day where customers know and they're not just sitting around waiting for me. But you also want to make sure, sometimes you'll miss customers, follow up with them, but just make sure that you're involved with the customer enough to let them know that their party is of the utmost concern to you, and that you're keeping tabs on the whole process. And you're going to have customers that don't communicate back to you, and that's fine. You can just kind of move on. There's other customers that are going to demand a lot of attention. So at the end of the day, you just got to make sure that you feel out each customer and attend to their needs as appropriate. The next don't is don't operate without knowing your worth. A lot of this, again, goes back to one of the do's I said, which make sure you do your research on your craft and your market. Make sure that you understand what bartenders of your caliber are charging, and if you can charge maybe more or less depending on the services they provide, the testimonials they have, their basic clout. You can make sure that you kind of find your price bracket, so to speak, of the maximum amount you can charge customers, but that's also feasible for you to get the most events that you can get. Also, you don't want to operate without a website. It's possible. I've seen it done before. Everybody has different ways of reaching out, but whether it's a website, Facebook, Instagram, some sort of media platform that allows you to be seen, known, and preferably allows you to list your terms and conditions up front and the booking process, that's something you're going to want to have, because I personally, in this day and age, don't really trust pretty much any business that doesn't have some sort of website or social media platform. So again, you may be able to operate for some time without it, but you're going to be able to reach a lot more customers if you have a place they can go to, especially with those business cards I told you about. Those leave behinds are great for directing people to the places that you need them to go to get them to book another event. The next don't is don't show up without your tools. Again, I've done this before. That's why you at least, at the very, very, very least, want to have your wine key and your beer opener. So that way, if you get in a jam, at least you can open those things. Again, you can operate without pours for liquor and all the other jazz that I talk about in other videos. With that said, you don't want to really tip the fate with that, and you want to make sure that if you have a big 200-person event where they ask you to bring, coolers and all that other stuff that I can't think of the top of my head right now, you don't want to show up with just your bar key or your wine key and your beer opener, because you're going to look kind of foolish. With that said, as long as you have those two, you may be able to squeeze by, but just make sure that you make a list of the stuff you need to bring, go over the contract with your that you sign with your customer, and make sure that you're bringing everything ahead of time. The next thing is to make sure that you don't do oral agreements with customers. And again, this goes back to the contracts I talked about before. I'm not going to beat that into the ground, but basically, stuff you send through an email, that's not really that enforceable, especially like in a court of law, if that ever comes to that case, which it never has for me. But at the end of the day, you want to be professional and thorough in how you express to customers, how your services are rendered, what they cost. And that way there's no confusion, because there's a lot of things, again, that you won't be able to discuss with the customer that should have been addressed beforehand should any problems arise. So again, make sure you have written contracts that you and your customer can sign. So if anything arises, you can point back to that language and say, look, this is the terms of our agreement. The next don't overbook yourself, which again, I'm very guilty of, where I remember I've had 5-6 parties in a day before I even realized that I booked them all on the same day. And Lord willing, I got them done somehow, some way. You always find a way, but it's best just not to do it. It's a lot of unnecessary stress you don't want. And eventually you're going to be able to expand your capacity and your staff to where you're going to make sure that you're not overbooked. You have the appropriate staff and resources available, and you'll be able to streamline things a lot better. And the last don't, and most importantly, is never, ever cheat your customers. Trust me, I've had opportunities where I've been able to cheat my customers, whether it's they gave me too much money, there was a misunderstanding about the price that benefited my end, they didn't realize there was a I missed a discount, whatever. Always be upfront with your customers. I guarantee you, at least in the game of karma, it will come back to benefit you greatly. Customers always love a transparent bartender that's fair. And trust me, if you're doing things right, you're going to be commanding enough money to where you don't have to cheat your customers, and that the price that you set is fair enough. And if anything, customers will want to give you more money if you're operating the right way. So anyway, those are a few of the do's and don'ts that I can think off the top of my head. But I just wanted to make sure that I just gave you kind of a landscape and a list of things to strive for and a list of things to avoid when it comes to getting this bartender business. So as always, if you like what you saw, make sure you click the like or subscribe button. As always, this is Dr. Mix-a-Lot. Happy mixing and cheers to unbeatable service.